Hello, everyone. This is Francis Martin and Curt from Natural Law Institute. This is our now weekly, I guess, as we're catching up again, office hours Q&A session where we answer the questions you ask us. We have quite a long list going. We eventually do get to them. The form for your submission of your questions is in the comments below, in the comments under the YouTube video.
YouTube video description.
Yeah. How this usually works is that you'd think I would have written a script for this by now. How this usually works is that Francis reads the question, Martin provides his answer, which is usually right, and I add depth and color, which means I talk for too long. Anyway, it's turned out that we've had hundreds and hundreds of these questions now that are accumulating in quite a bit of a knowledge base, and hopefully at some point in the future we'll restore our effort to try to break them into shorts. I suspect that the AIs will get good at it before we do. So they would be more accessible. But in any event, until that happens, thank you for joining us, and we'll do our best. And I'll see if I can get my face to focus and hear what's going on.
No, it's in focus now.
Okay, now it is. Okay. All right. So normally Martin goes through and starts a lot of answers. I tried to catch up with Martin, and unfortunately I did it too far in the future. And I do want to compliment Suki, who I don't know who this person is.
Don't encourage him.
I mean, we couldn't pay somebody to come up with these questions. This guy's amazing. Although he does flood us with them. All right. So, all right. Anything else you want to say? Any announcements this week? Anything you want to start before we get going? Got Francis?
No announcements. No. Let's just get going.
Martin, anything for you? Anything from you? No.
No.
All right. It's other than don't encourage him. All right. All right. Let's get started then.
Okay. Question 1 for Suki. Consider the idea of investing in the mass proliferation of in vitro fertilization selection clinics across the nation for the selection of the best embryo and embryo gene editing selected by parents under constraints of law to prevent undesirable outcomes, just like the Constitution promotes investment in electric vehicles until our streets are quiet.
Well, I oppose this too. Most obviously, the government stating what's undesirable, if we can't absolutely guarantee its perpetual control by our guys, and even then, our guys can have bad ideas too. But furthermore, when some people do it, it drives those who don't do it out of competition. And this will lead to optimization for traits seen as desirable at the given time and place, as opposed to what may be actually conducive to long-term group survival, particularly outlier traits that can be immensely beneficial to the group at the cost of individual happiness would be threatened, as would be exploration via random mutations. So my opposite proposal is this: define certain natural processes as so sacred that all interference in them and competition to them must be criminalized.
Martin, can you say it again? I didn't think I caught that. What should be criminalized?
Just ban interference and competition to certain natural processes, including anything relating to reproduction.
Hmm. First of all, I don't think. Okay, wait a minute. So, are you saying we shouldn't be testing for uh, genetic incompatibilities or in utero genetic defects? Is that what you're saying? Are you saying we shouldn't do manipulation of the genome to create superior attributes in children?
If the embryo is produced randomly, and then you find out it's defective somehow and abort it, I still don't see that as that bad compared to making the selection yourself.
Oh, the via negativa versus the via
Positive.
positiva.
That's what I
Right.
was asking. So I was worried that he was conflating the two together.
If we are certain that something is obviously going to be a big problem, then yeah. But
and,
otherwise, you can be absolutely certain what will be a problem, what will be a benefit. I want to preserve that randomness.
my opinion is that if the technology is available, that a market will develop for it, and that there's no way to outlaw it. It's very hard to say what's the difference between once you have eliminated a deep. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying what I think will happen. Um, what I think will happen is that what happens in all things is that we'll get rid of critical things like, cystic fibrosis, which is my daughter's area of expertise. You'll get rid of, other. One of the things we get rid of really easily would be whatever's causing the unnecessary shortening of telomeres, right? That would be huge, right, for cancers and whatever. So, so I can't. The problem is, over time, what constitutes a bad is on a curve, right? And so you're going. So I think over time, humans are going to say, well, Kurt's French side of the family tends to be around 5'7", 5'8", right? Maternal side of the families, and his paternal side of the family tends to be around 5'10", 5'11". So that's a defect on his maternal side. Why wouldn't we want to have all our kids be in the higher range? I can see that happening.
I'm sure you consider the Frenchness itself the defect.
Yeah, I love you. God, I love you. Yes. So, oh my God, I didn't see it coming either. Um, but so my belief is that there for so there's curing ills, then there's making upgrades, and I'm afraid of upgrades of the because of the complexity of of how genetics play out. For example, we tend to think about things in terms of this gene does that, but it's not like that. It's this gene influences the probability of that. And this gene plus these regulatory processes of its expression influence the probability of that production, which influences the probability of production in response to some stimuli. And so the thing is that it's better to think of most genes as channels of influence rather than, the way we originally intuited it is that it was more mechanical, like you're replacing a part in a car or something. I mean, my best area of expertise is the neurosystem, and I know how fucking complicated that is and how probabilistic it is, which is why we're so different from each other despite our relatively similar genetics, even within the same families. So I look at it as I'm like starting to trying to eliminate known harms is different from trying to instantiate leaps in benefit. For example, we've identified certain things, which I've listed before, as how to make it so that we don't build up lactic acid in our muscles, right? That's a genetic pattern we've identified, and we probably could adapt. Well, what does that mean? It means you can run marathons all day fucking long. I mean, you
I'm
what?
sure there's a reason why we're not supposed to do that, though.
I'm pretty sure there's a reason not, but which is why I'm saying it, right? Is that so you can do that. We know that a bigger heart and bigger lung capacity are uh, are an improvement. We see it in humans, in athletes, and in horses in particular, where I know the most of the research is. I mean, if you want a horse that wants to win a championship, you basically give it a bigger heart, right? So how do we engineer a bigger heart? Right. We know that some women can see additional colors. In other words, they're computational colors that are not necessarily part of what we consider the color spectrum. So they're essentially color harmonics, but they can see them. Those are the three I usually mention. I have a bunch of others if I go into my notes. But so we could make people quite a bit physically superior. Um, uh, the one, so I won't go in. I'm just my urge is to go into more detail, and I don't need to. Um, the problem is we don't know what the consequences of those improvements are. When it gets to something like intelligence, there's stuff that we know, right? But intelligence looks like it's affected by 1,000 things, right, or more, right? I mean, certainly many hundreds, but it looks like it's by over 1,000 things. So, do we want to go in and fuck with 1,000 fucking variables in a person? I mean, it's one thing if you can fill out that this single SNP will cause a defect that will produce, some goddamn birth defect that will plague you during your whole life. I mean, that I can understand changing that thing, right? But some of these things are computationally what I would consider matters of recombinant or combinatorics. In other words, multi-causal variation during, by multiple categories of cells in multiple states, right? That are in multiple stages of development at different times. And so combinatorically, I would think that would be extremely that would be experimenting on people negatively. So I'm from my perspective, and I want to show this is different from what I think Martin is saying. From my perspective, we're going to continue down this path, but the thing is, who's responsible for the harm? I use this as this example as the counter example to how do you know what's we call assisted suicide, euthanasia, which is one of the tests I run against the Runcible governance layer when I want to see if it's actually deciding correctly, because it's a hard problem. The hard problem is the assisting person assisting you can never know it's what you really want or what you would want in the future. And so it's one thing to pull the trigger yourself. It's another thing to have someone there help you with it, so to speak. And for most of the time, what it appears is they want emotional support while they're doing it. So we don't even know if they're asking, because it's pretty easy to off yourself, to be honest. So why do you want emotional support while you're doing it? Well, is that because you just want emotional support, and if you had the emotional support, you wouldn't do it? So the problem with euthanasia is that it goes from that to being, well, grandma needs to off herself because she's a burden on us, right? And then it goes to encouraging offing yourself down this what we call slippery slope, which is really just moving the baseline. So I don't. That's why I have a problem these issues is that what is it? Who's going to bear the responsibility for a harm, right? When you don't actually know the answer. And it's the same problem I have with transgender. Is it's clear these people are mentally unhealthy, and that there's ways of preventing, which is basically historical means of child rearing, and assisting in identity disorders. Well, that's fine. You know, work on that. But once you make a permanent change to someone, you're now liable for influencing that person, facilitating that person's change. And if it's restitutable or recoverable, that's something different. But when you're talking about a person's biological development, it's not restitutable. And so you've participated in that person's act of self-harm, and therefore you're liable for it. My argument is we should make doctors liable for participation in self-harm, right? So for psychological reasons is what I mean. So
in my opinion, is you're just trying to fit it somehow into framework of reciprocity, and I think it doesn't need to be that.
Right, that's where I was going.
Yeah, just say it's disgusting. You're pressing it to be something.
Hey, pause. Okay, one at a time.
I said I was going to bring in Martin for. I already said that because I know this is the underlying issue, is that I'm trying to solve it as an issue of decidability under natural law. That's not the full scope of reasons to make choices, right? It would just, my argument is just that who's fucking liable for screwing something up? That's right. That's what I'm asking, right? And that tends to be a good means by which to break a problem down into questions. Now, you have a different question. You have a different concern. So can explain your concern, and we can talk about the difference. Because I think
I'm saying it's disgusting, and you're lying about their sex. You're helping them pretend they're something they're not. Of course, we don't allow that. It's very simple.
Well, so you're making the same. You're just making the our argument further up the chain, right? I mean, I'm making the argument to the basics of why you can't do anything, and you're saying why you shouldn't do this in particular, and I'll agree with you. Yeah, I would agree with you. I've noticed this with both you and Luke. Once in a while, is you're not wrong. You're just moving higher up the decision tree. And higher up the decision tree feels more accessible and relevant. Well, it is more relevant because it's closer to the problem that you're dealing with. And I always go down to the first principle, but it's the same.
I consider disgust the first principle.
Yeah, but you can't. But we don't have the same disgust responses.
Well,
correct.
We usually converge unless there's something very wrong with the individual.
Well, but then we need a test for what's wrong with the individual. We need that test. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that this is a great way of illustrating which criteria are you using for making your decision. I thought my disgust response is actually pretty high, right? I mean, I'm a conservative libertarian, so I have obviously a pretty high disgust response. That instead, I still work past it to my emotions and try to figure out the underlying cause. But anyway, what did I want to?
I've developed higher disgust response after learning how wrong I was.
Oh, I see. Well, it's maybe smart. Actually, it's not maybe smart. That is smart. So you're like, oh, I see. So now I got a new meme for you, Martin. So it's like the recovered smokers. And once you become an ex-smoker, you hate smoke. You ever meet those people? Hate smokers or ex-anybody's? No? So now you're like you have the amplitude of an ex something. Oh, I just wanted to throw in a couple things. Cost breakdown. It's not that expensive. to get the tests, the genetic tests. They're smaller now, though. Interesting. Wow. In vitro is really, it's incredibly expensive. I would say the biggest problem we have to figure out for men today is why their sperm count is declining. I used to be on the side of it, the estrogen and the plastics, but now I don't know.
The issue with in vitro fertilization, with reasons it's performed today, is if you have problems reproducing naturally, do we want to produce future generations that are even more unable?
Yes.
If you can't reproduce like a healthy human in the past could, then you shouldn't.
I understand. That's a decision I'm not comfortable making for people.
Of course, nobody likes to hear that, but
I'm not disagreeing with you. Saying it's a decision I don't. There's a category of things we call decidable. In other words, there's a category of things that are always decidable independent of context. There is a category of things. There are category of things that are essentially political decisions. They're decisions of what happens to the gene pool, the gene pool, and therefore the cultural pool of the polity. And so we leave those to political decisions. In that case, I would leave that up to the population, which would probably then agree with you. Okay.
On gene editing, I also worried about what happens when the relationship of parent to a child stops being from I gave birth to you, I raised you, to I designed you.
Yes. Interesting. That's a great study. We should think about that.
My two cents on all this is it sounds to me like this is a computationally irreducible problem, at least based on our current level of understanding.
Yep.
And for computationally reducible problems, it's better to leave it to nature.
That's a great rule, general rule, actually. If it's computationally irreducible, then it's or hands off, and until that time, it is computationally reducible. That's probably a very smart general rule, and it prevents hubris.
Prevents hubris and prevents irreversible mistakes, harms.
What did I just? Shit. You just said something else too. Damn it, I lost it. All right. That was a great one. That was a great question.
Was it about computational irreducibility or harm or what?
It was before you brought it up, and I can't. It was too interesting, so I ran with it, and now I've forgotten what I was going to say.
About the relationship of parent to child and the child.
Yes.
That's it. So that's another great avenue of exploration. I can tell you how I feel about my children, and realize I haven't spent much time with my kids, really, unless we were very young. But I still feel a certain thing, and I have stepkids, right? And so I can tell you how I feel about stepkids. It's not the fucking same. I mean, it's not, and I don't. It's not because I want it to be. Don't want it to be the same. I want it to be the same, but I don't feel the same. And the question is, if I had designed a kid, I think you fall in between the two of them somewhere. You're part me and part not me. Is that how it works? Or what if you're part me and that's then an accident, but if I manipulate you and you turn out bad, then what? That's a very interesting line of
It's the line of externalities that, again, how do you compute that, right?
Right.
And it's also framing, I thought of, to the extent you're replacing your own genes with something else, you're making yourself a cock.
Uh-huh.
As imperfect as your genes may be, they are your genes.
My kids are with a Dutch girl, a Czech girl, and a Norwegian girl. And they all reflect those relationships. They all reflect my partner as much as me. And I always think, wow, that the problem is you don't want to inbreed, but you do want to near breed. And one of the ways to look at it, I'll compliment the Slavs here again, is I always wonder why Slavic body form is so much better than most Germanic body form. What I really mean is the distribution of the Slavic body form is narrower and better than the distribution of the Germanic body form, right? Well, and that's because the Slavs were isolated for fucking ever. I mean, until after 500. I mean, the Slavic language doesn't even differentiate until I think that much until like 700. I might get this wrong. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's like 7. Might even be later.
It's similar to Sanskrit in some ways.
Yes. So it's really so you get this isolate. So whereas you get into more in the cure of year, and I was looking at the genetics for this weekend, yesterday afternoon. Somebody asked me a question. So on Christmas, which I thought was weird, is that you have a lot less admixture in the Slavic genome than you do like in the Germanic and especially in the really western part of the European continent. So because there's 3 peoples, right? We have the old Europeans, which is what I mostly am. You have the people who come in from the Anatolians, right? The people in the south. And then you have the people of the steppe, right? But when they come in, they're coming in and admixing with 3 different groups. Because during the Ice Ages, there were 3 groups of Europeans closer to the Mediterranean that survived, and then they moved upward, which is why we have the I and etc. gene pools. So you have this spread, and then you have this introgression from the south, and you have this introgression from the north on down, and so you get Germans who are more have more internal admixture. Germans, I mean the Germanic peoples, which is basically most of the people above the Alps, are Scandinavian, German, right, etc. And you have this admixture, and so you get a wider variety of body types. Then you get down to like parts of Italy where there's been like immigration from all over the Mediterranean for forever, and it's like God just gave up on maintaining any kind of genetic similarity. And so I mean, I remember I was in Milan airport, and I'm like, God just got confused here, man. God got confused here. Something just wasn't right. Because the body forms are all over the goddamn map. You have the people that were oh God, what's their name? The big people with lots of hair and the beards, Longobards. They stick out like a sore thumb because they're gorgeous, right? They're huge and they're gorgeous.
I work with a Lombardi, although he's more tall and thin because he's a bicyclist versus built up. He's he's taller than at least half 4 inches than me.
Right. And then you have like the people that were in the south that would be under that were pressed in subsistence for a long time, and they're shorter, right? You have the whole fucking spectrum there. But you get the Slavs, and you get this really great body form, which is gracile, right? We have the broad square shoulders, the long legs, and they seem to vary a lot less. there are a couple of tribes out there in Slavic tribes I don't fucking get. I'm not sure where the hell they're from. But I'd figure out if I was going to spend time on it. So you get this whole thing. So the problem is, and yet even then, so because of the structure of Europe and the mobility of Europe, and because of the kind of trade and food production we have, what you find out is that Europeans are not genetically very different. You know, they're more different than, say, the Japanese are, but they're not really, they're not a diverse population.
Yeah, we are more related than Chinese to Japanese, for example.
Yes. So the point I'm trying to get to is that, you know, you're better off near breeding, because it's easier to accelerate benefits and extract defects. Unfortunately, humans are, which I've tried to make this point all the time in the race versus what do you call it? Race versus species argument, is that humans are sexually plastic. I mean, we have guys trying to have sex with car tailpipes, right? I mean, Jesus Christ, I mean, fucking sheep and whatever. So humans are plastic. Humans are less resistant, or they're more opportunistic with sex. So it tends to be easier, despite the fact that we isolated and formed essentially four or five, depending on how you want to break it down, four to five core species, maybe. I don't remember what the number is, 8 or 9 when you account for all the limits. But there's like four or five base species, speciation events. And then we rehybridized and played that game again and all over. Like, we call these people the Turkics, but what are they really? They're North Chinese mixed with Iranics, which is the north part of the West Eurasians, and then mixed with some Europeans, right? I mean, so you get hybridizations, and what do you look down in the Southeast Asia? You've got people who are hybrids of all sorts of things, and you get down into, because Asians are really fucking successful gene pool. It's amazing.
Well, define success by what? Numbers?
By territory. I mean, look. I
Yeah.
mean, you just look at the territorial coverage of Asians is fucking phenomenal. So in rapidly, right? I mean, you could argue that it's a slightly better climate than the fucking northward and westward expansion would get you, but still, it's pretty amazing to even to cross the land bridge into the Americas and settle all that. I mean, that's pretty freaking amazing. So and fast, right? I mean, and very fast. So when you get into where am I trying to go with this? So the right answer would be that despite human plasticity, right? It turns out that can be good for, that was good for us when we spread out among the universe, right, the planet, and then we started hybridizing. You can see that, but by the beginning of the ice ages, there was the different races today, the core races, were effectively different species. The thing is, we hit agrarianism, and that just allowed us to just touch each other and start hybridizing. And then we invented all sorts of ways of traveling fast and controlling our destiny, and happened more. The problem is, when you get hybridization, is you get deviation from whatever the mean was, and you resist regression to the mean. Well, regression to the mean would hopefully be things that were beneficial for you. And unfortunately, it's not always true. Like, one of the weird ones is sickle cell anemia versus malaria. I mean, right, it turns out that something that's horrible is also a benefit. So anyway, so that's my argument is just probably causally, I'm making the same argument Martin is, except that I'm using the chord, the chord underlying metrics of it. All right, what's next?
Okay. Question 2 from Suki. Thoughts on New Age spirituality?
Well, it's touching on something old and Abrahamistic, which I'd say is healthy. But because it's dominated by women, the results are what you'd expect.
Oh, I didn't read that before I made my own note. There's how do I want to deal with this? I'll separate. You got to deal with spiritualism before you deal with gods. So all of us have some sense of uncertainty. The second thing we have is we have an internal intuition or internal voice. That internal voice is what we call the combination of instinct, experience, and developed intuition. So in the past, philosophers have discussed this quite a bit, and what's the movie Westworld? The series Westworld.
Yeah, the TV series.
Right,
I wish to finish it. Although toward the last season, it got a little weird and repetitive. But it's produced by Christopher Nolan's brother.
Right. So the first season and the second season, they do cover this quite a bit, which is that the argument that intelligence evolves from this the internal voice, right? So anyway, so there is this problem of dealing with the internal voice, but there's a greater problem, which we start calling as uncertainty, so we end up with neuroticism. Neuroticism, I don't like the term, but it's basically the fear, the anxiety to fear to panic response in the absence of information sufficient to make it a decision. And this is, which is framed in the psychological profession as the dominance of negative thinking, or the tendency to identify negative risks. Well, men are slightly biased to be prey animals, and women, for reproductive reasons, logically, are biased to be herd animals. So women have a prey. I said this wrong. Males are biased to be predatory animals, and females are biased to be prey animals. And so women have females in particular. Excuse me. I'm not over this flu yet. So women have a predominance of neurotic thoughts, and women are less able to detach from their intuitions than men are. Thank you for male compartmentalization has its value, and female integration has its value. Female integration helps with in-time perception of others' wants and needs, frame minds needs, and male has the insulation from that for various reasons. So the point here is that there is a tendency for humans, as populations increase, right, and anonymity increases, to develop a need for something that compensates for the absence of continuous reinforcement that occurs in tribal life. So the thing I try to tell people is try to just watch videos of how people behave as primitive hunter-gatherers, and you'll find that they never shut the fuck up. They're not operating as individuals. They're always operating as teams, and they rarely operate as individuals. And so what happens is you're continually reinforced by the entire distribution of the population you're part of, which is small. It's an extended family, or a group of extended families among hunter-gatherers. Well, imagine that you know what it's like to be alone in a dark room. I mean, go to the opposite, a sensory deprivation chamber. People can't handle it. They can't handle it at all. Put yourself on an island alone. People can't handle it. They can't handle it at all. You know, the minute you have another person, all of a sudden there's the ability to get some regulated response externally. Now, we jokingly, Brad and I jokingly call this sharing each other's prefrontal cortex for self. In other words, you get your self-regulation from interacting with others. This is true. So what happens is that you develop there's enough an emergent anonymity, and there's enough lack of feedback. It needs people need to come up with a means of self-regulation. The internal one is what we call spiritualism. Right? It's the inner narrative that produces some sort of system within which we can rationalize or accommodate those impulses. Likewise, when we live in small groups, there's always a headman or headmen or something, right? And so as we get bigger populations, we develop chieftains, right? And leadership teams, etc. What happens as we get beyond that, as we get into, especially into agrarian societies, we get a division of labor. We get not only division of labor that we had in tribal society, but we get a division of knowledge in labor. People have way more knowledge about some things than others. They have way more responsibilities. So what happens is, instead of the chieftain being a proxy for the tribe, we invent one. We invent one because we need one. Because real people have real failings, and real people in power have very real, very dangerous things. So we invent gods. Now there's a there's a gradient between the authoritarian gods that we have, because we actually need some system of measurement to run by, right? And that's why we invented these fictional creatures. And in the middle, there's this whole range of characters that lead up to those omniscient, omnipotent gods, which is the Abrahamic ones, right? And so we start out with mythical heroes, spirit world creatures, and then we end up with we end up with ghosts, spirit world creatures. We end up with animism of all sides. We end up with mythical characters, and we end up with demigods, and we end up with all sorts of gods, whatever. And so all of these things are a means of creating order when we don't have a means of order, and particularly of suppressing uncertainty, with this caused by various degrees of neuroticism, or means of organizing when we're not having, when we means of organizing as our interests become competitive with one another. So, New Age spirituality. I argue that. So my argument is that the West natural religion would be nature. The natural religion would be nature worship, right? Nature, ancestor, hero worship, right? Something to your culture, which would make you aligned with your culture and its group strategy. And on top of that, some means of obtaining the mindfulness. The Western mindfulness was Stoicism. The Eastern, or the North Indian, which became Eastern, ended up being Buddhism, right? The West is so. But even then, if in China became political theory became Confucianism, and the West became philosophy, right? And so the other two never seemed to make both India crashed out after about 1000 and stopped producing what we would think is philosophy, and the Middle East never escaped its fundamentalism, mostly because of Islam, I assume. So because they simply couldn't get far enough. You could argue that it's the IQ problem. I think it's both those things, and the heterogeneity problem. So what's the real answer for it is that New Age spirituality is an attempt, specifically, as Martin said, largely by women. Not that there aren't cognitively feminine men. There are, and you see them in this stuff, and they're like, to me, they're like, you're not a man. I don't know what you are. And what they're really looking for is mindfulness, because they don't trust others, or they can't empathize and sympathize with them, or they have very high neuroticism, or they're broken in some other way. But what there really is we have dropped off our ritual method, Christianity, and we haven't brought back in some substitute for it. Well, I'm always saying Stoicism is basically cognitive behavioral therapy, so it's basically science. But I think that's great. So you can give people that form of mindfulness, but then you have to handle the social anxiety part, which is you have to have some sort of ritual that brings people into a state of relative equality for some period of time, which we usually do, humans, through feasts, right? Because that's the ancient way
Hmm.
humans put the feast, put God each other equal as they brought together each other for a feast. And that feasts moderated and celebrations afterwards, and frankly, sex afterwards, moderated those
The
conflicts.
feast and orgy. Is that what
Right.
you're getting at?
Clearly that you have food, fucking, and sleep, and you're all good. Everybody's goddamn happy. Will be good for the next month, right? But that's really what it happens. And so the reality is that's what essentially the church does. A church does, all right, or a temple or whatever. It provides the equivalent of a sacred space where all relatively equal. In other words, you are equally prohibited from self uh, from capture of the commons for your own benefit, and instead we're all equally contributing that commons. So the argument among the communists was that we could use education for it. It doesn't work because they try to teach the wrong kind of thing in it.
Hmm.
We could use education for it work if education were ritualized. When I went to school, yeah, I would get, they would give the Pledge of Allegiance stuff, whatever, but there were more than that. There were what do you call them, parades and that kind of shit, all sorts of civic events. Because I lived in a town of 10,000 people, we did that shit all the time, right? It was the 4th of July, so you had all this civic stuff going on all the time, and because of a lot of availability of information, because of urbanization, mobility, and frankly the preponderance of forms of entertainment like television and movies and this kind of stuff.
So quick question. Maybe you know this, but do schools even do these like bonfire dance events anymore?
Not as far as I know. I mean,
Because I remember when I was in 5th grade in China, they actually did this bonfire event, right? Literally, it's after dark. You make a bonfire, and we're supposed to do this group, all kinds of group movements, and the dance is just one of them. But like every morning, you see these videos of in Japan, Korea, and China, these little kids get on the playground and do these morning exercise routines.
yeah, that's a very East Asian thing, right?
Hmm.
The that we generally had games, right? So you'll think of the maypole game as the common one that everybody brings up all the time. So we have
Okay.
we we have games. So there's a little more of a sports influence
Hmm.
than a dance influence in the West, and so a lot more sport, a lot more down there. Like the Olympics are really
Hmm.
they're not for the heroes. They're for everybody. Right? Everybody runs naked around the stupid thing, and boys and girls and all that, right? So it's more of a sport thing, or the maypole thing is a great example of it. Um, and pre-Christian history is full of this kind of stuff too. But I would say it's um, that they suppressed all of that, and I don't really know why. I know that our favorite. Go ahead.
No, I'm just clearing my throat.
Okay. Well, I remember when it happened. I remember it happening during the '60s as they tried to culturally erase us, right? So the cultural Marxism came in. It was very visible in my childhood because it was a shock. Um,
Well, Abrahamic / Platonic playbook was always the same. Uh, all these things, rituals that bring people together, it must be destroyed.
Yeah,
So
because I
that
think it serves the purpose of if people cannot organize and you destroy all type of rituals that allow people to organize, then these guys stand unopposed.
Mm-hmm. They're trying to transfer. They're trying to transfer, centralize power
Hmm.
into whatever commentariat that they've produced. So anyway, I made my argument more than enough that I think I need to make it. It's a human need that arises in the face of increasing anonymity and a division of labor, and so we have to find ways of supplanting it. There has to be both internal regulation, which is some kind of mindfulness ritual. I favor stoicism. There's another version for women, which is called the four what is it called?
for agreements.
The four agreements, which is a much simpler version and it's more suitable to.
I think the point of that is also to make women tolerable to be around.
Yes, exactly. It's you can't. Statistics right now are getting worse. When I first started studying this stuff in the 80s, we thought about a third of women were nuts. It's actually about 60% now. And so having women not have a system of mindfulness is one thing. But the second thing is they need both. The way men need it is we need internal more than external, whereas women need external more than internal. Right, and so it's like we always try to solve these problems for everybody, but they're really sex dynamic questions. And so,
Frankly, they're underfucked. That's why they're insane.
Underfucked and not pregnant all the time.
Without,
I talked
baby.
to a gal the other day who's like the second to last or the second youngest out of 11 children. I was like, damn, your mother and father are really productive. Apparently, like her mother initially didn't want kids, and then somehow got flipped, and then just boom, 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 one a year.
it's fucking addictive. Women, there are like, I know a lot of women that if it wasn't for the money, they would have 6 kids. They're in a prison now where they have to have
Society, modern society. How did your friend Roger put it? There's bound to be something wrong with modern. I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember originally how he said it. Something wrong with modern society that we as a species are not having children because it's so oppressive.
Yeah, this is expensive. We should, I sometimes do these tests where I just take the opposite position all the way to an extreme, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did this the other day, and like the point is that we took women from having no choice but getting married to having kids, to having no choice but to getting married and not having kids, right? I mean, the not getting married and not having kids because it's because of consumption. So and they're not happy. They're not happy. It's not okay.
Yeah, it's one of the big errors of liberalism, that giving people more choices is good for them.
Yes.
Give them the right choices.
Yeah. More isn't necessarily better.
I mean, even if they're good choices, that more choices just means analysis paralysis.
More choice. I look at it as more choices without knowledge of consequence. All right. So where are we now?
We are on question 3. From Suki, imagine this scenario. An NLI-supported faction overthrow the government with a majority support of U.S. citizens, and they implement a completed, perfected document of NLI to govern the United States. So, my champion, this is purely hypothetical to any Feds listening. This doesn't mean that we're trying to overthrow the government or anything like that. So, how do we liberate other countries around the world, i.e., EU, South Africa, Canada, Chile, etc., whose governments are similarly affected by the leftist mind virus, but which lack legislatures that protect their right to bear arms and freedom of speech needed to start an uprising? Would a military ultimatum wherein these governments are threatened to give up power and replace our governments with NLI compatible governments, or else will open a hell's gate on them, make sense? If so, how should it go? That military ultimatum by the new, like, let's call it neo-United States or something. Frankly, I think these governments, the people of these under these illegal governments, should make that call.
Well, my answer is you don't do that. Liberation by an external party was always a cover for integrating them into their own sphere, or empire, if you will, and not letting them have any choice about it. The only nation that can liberate itself is, well, itself. But a sincere show of goodwill would be ceasing to fund the other side.
I don't think so, because Mark's right. I thought this was going to be a good question when it started out. Imagine this scenario, right? That for some reason, our solution inspired some faction to overthrow the government. Well, I thought it was going to be good, but then you got to other countries, and I'm like, it's none of our fucking business. If they were to ask, if the majority of a lot of the people within a country asked us to assist them in overthrowing their government, that would be, and they were kin, right? Then that would be one thing. Like if England said,
but really, they'd be asking to be colonized.
Oh, well, here's the thing. We don't have to send over the entire military. There are these people called special forces who's designed to go there and train guys to fight whatever.
okay,
Hell,
so
if today, if the UK people, or a significant fashion of the UK people, somehow put out words and saying, hey, we deem the government illegitimate, or actually, let's put it this way. Let's say the king, what's the official term? It wouldn't be letter marquee. It would put out some kind of declaration and say, hey, we need help retaining our country to make it Anglo-American, Anglo-Saxon again. Do you think that there wouldn't be significant portions of U.S. Special Forces just volunteer to go over there and train them?
absolutely.
Yeah? Hell yeah.
I mean, when I was in Ukraine, I mean, I wanted to go take up the fight for them.
And it's not the same thing as we're going to send a couple of aircraft carriers over there and whatever. I mean, it wouldn't be that kind of fight either, right? Aircraft carriers.
You're just making the argument, the same argument I've made for years, which is that the IRA is really the best way of. The IRA model is the best way of overthrowing.
It's surprisingly easy to make even the first world government ungovernable.
Yep.
All right, let's move on. Question 4 from Suki. Follow-up question. Okay, that's interesting. What is the most likely scenarios that would lead to a fraction or party supporting by NLI principles to take over the government and reform the USA? 2, I'm assuming that given... I love and hate these compound questions. Like you're getting 3 for the price of 1. Suki, in case you're listening. 2, I'm assuming that given the options, non-exhaustive, an insurrection, pro-NLI, which takes over by force, a dominant political party, pro-NLI, which would violate the previous government structure in order to reinstate a new one. The former is the most likely option, correct? I.e., a pro-NLI insurrection which takes over by force, okay? And 3, what will the transition look like from point A, moment of victory, to B, a fully restructured civilization across the board, and that being legally, politically, economically, behaviorally, etc.?
Okay,
I'm gonna
so
need to read it again to unpack it.
here's let me start this out. Okay, so in the past 12 months, I've had to spend a few hours, more than a few hours, with the FBI because they monitor me. All right, and because they consider me someone who would uh, like to bring this about. Um, and I'm like, well, uh, the way my argument with them is, uh, I don't bring this about, you do, and if I just provide the answers to what we should do afterwards. On the other hand, in the past, when I thought that when I thought that the U.S. was going to flip and things were going to light up here, I thought it was better to accelerate the process to control it than it was to let it simply happen. Um, and of course, that's why I was afraid of Hillary because she's a Leninist, and I was said, okay, well, this can't happen. We can't have another. We can't go from Clinton one to Obama to Hillary. That's just suicide. So, so your question, if I can wrap this into a package, is the problem we've thought about from the Institute's perspective. Is if things are going the right way, we merely need to provide solutions. In other words, solutions. If things are going the wrong way, we need to provide directions. In other words, so what happened was once um, once the the world flipped, which was happened under COVID, being rather stupid, being a really interesting sort of failure on the part of the left, because they thought between Hillary and COVID, they had sort of excuse me, they thought between Obama, Hillary, and COVID that they were on a victory march. They really had done what all leftists do, is they pushed too far and they flipped a bit on the American people.
But I haven't forgotten that all the original impulse for lockdowns and vaccinations came from Trump administration. And then left opposed them, and when Trump went the other direction, left flipped against him.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, I mean, he did not want to impose all those restrictions. He's like, I don't know. He did what a lot of people should have done, which is say, I don't know the answer. What do the experts say? And the experts were, of course, wrong. Um, so let's go back to it and say that shit, I lost my train of thought. Is that our position is that this is our position was to look at this year, 2025, and see if what I believed would happen would, and so far it's on schedule, though the left is reorganizing slightly faster than I thought they would. If we get through this 4 years, and all right, I'm thinking that there'll be a counter reaction, there always is. But if we get through this 4 years, what will happen is there will be enough of a shift that we won't have to have a civil war. I'm not positive. I'm not positive at all. Trump's policies will avert a civil war. They won't make the left happy, but they'll avert a civil war. I don't know how durable they are, because I suspect, unless I'm wrong, that despite the current improvements in the economy, this has been a good year for our country. Despite that, and if the left can organize and find enough reasons to get and put somebody in on the to replace Trump, we might get a new administration that would try to reverse a lot of this. And then if that happens, then I think we're back to game on for um, a revolution. If not, and we could, and I think what I think is going to happen is the current momentum in the West in general is going in the right direction and will end up being corrective over the next decade. So I'm hoping that's the case. If that's the case, the most likely scenario for NLI is to keep pushing our reforms the way we are. If unfortunately we are false, I think we will retrench back to advocacy of revolutionary. Now you have to understand that because I have an agreement with the FBI, agreement, I don't know if it's agreement, I've made them a promise that I won't do anything, and I'm getting older and unhealthy enough that I probably can't anyway, but I won't do anything that is on the level of providing leadership or plans that would show how to make the victory certain for our side. But the difference is I'm not the only person that knows how to do that today. So I think that will go there. So from an NLI, so I'm trying to answer the NLI perspective here, which is that as long as it's going in the right direction, we will focus on solutions, and the only time we will shift back to what the FBI doesn't want me to do, which is the unfortunate solution, which is direction, is in the case of we believe that the Civil War is going to light off one way or the other, and that some sort of intellectual leadership is needed. From my standpoint, I'm just happy that we don't have to play that role, and we can focus on the solutions side of the spectrum.
No, I don't think we entirely agree on what correction is. The correction will only go so far as to restore legitimacy to the regime, not to actually restore control of the government to white Americans or whites across the West, and with Zionists and globalists being driven out.
I think that we have yet to, you and I in particular, have yet to provide that. One of the next questions touches on this, question 6. So let's get to it there. But I'm pretty sure you and I can answer those questions, Martin. That's different from me saying them up front, right? I didn't say that stuff out loud, right? There was no value in it, but doesn't mean we can't,
Okay.
right?
Wait, now that we're on topic, you mentioned question 6, the one about prosecution. So we're
Yeah.
skipping daylight savings.
Well, let's just flip them then.
That's probably going to be a quick one.
Okay, yeah. We're question 6 from Suki, an excerpt from the prosecution. The Muslims owe us 1 billion dead and 5 civilizations of the Semitic Dark Age. The Jews owe us 100 million dead in the century, millions of dead in Semitic Dark Age. And the suffering of ignorance, superstition, poverty, and disease of those who suffered under the lives of Jews for the past 2,000 years. Can you explain how the Muslims and Jews owe us all of that, particularly the Muslim owe us 1 billion dead? Because that sounds hyperbolical to me. Thank you.
Certainly, we should at least acknowledge radical Islam in the modern era is a product of the American foreign policy on behalf of Israel. But then again, we're talking about Judaism again.
Yeah. So the point I want to make about the prosecution is, first, I thought that wasn't visible anymore because I thought we took it down back in like 2022. So if it's still visible somewhere, I'd like to know. So PM me and I can take it off. This is the book, the prosecution, one of the volumes that we have said we will not publish until we have to publish it. Because it's everything else is not, everything else is merely descriptive. The prosecution is basically a polemic. It's a suit against those. It's a suit essentially against Abrahamism. and its contents with and at the damage that the Abrahamic religions have done over the past 2,000 years. And so in the billion dead, I mean, I don't have to go figure that out, but I mean, I'm not going to go through all of it now, but just go into any search criteria, or even pull up an AI if it'll tell you the truth anymore, of how many people Islam has killed over time, how many people it's enslaved, how many people it's killed over time. Because it's not spread by its virtues, it's actually spread by war. And then it's spread by undermining. Now that it's even, they're not capable of spreading it by war, they spread it by undermining. And so, where they can't do it by undermining, they do it through immigration, then undermining. So it is, I mean, it is a cancer. It's not, I mean, even Buddhism was resisted by the Japanese for a long time, because it was a religion of submission. So and eventually the state managed to instill it. Well, I mean, the state managed to instill Christianity in Russia. Maybe it was better it chose Christianity than Islam, because it was one of the choices. In Europe, the Christianity was imposed largely by force. I say it wasn't, but it was largely by force, and it was because it assisted the state in controlling the population. So I view these things as historical, as 2,000 years of historical evil. When we had completed Alexander's work, and except not fighting with Iran, right, the Persians, and which exhausted both sides, we left room for the Arabs to spread this cancer around the world. If we had not been so tolerant of the Jews, we would not have spread Christianity into Europe. So the problem is, why are we so susceptible to this claim of peace, which is actually suicide? So so when I look at how many deaths, they owe us about a billion dead. I think it's actually 6. So it's northwestern African, northern African, Egyptian, Levantine, uh, um, Mesopotamian, Anatolian, Persian, and whatever we call the Turkic peoples, Turkic civilizations. That's 9 civilizations Islam has made backward. And you know what it was like? It took to destroy the arts and letters of Egypt. What a loss that was. What it took to destroy Christianity, it took for Christians to destroy the arts and letters of Greece. We have only a fragment of it. You know, we talk about the Library of Alexandria burned, but you know, most of the contents, as I understand it, was commentary on the matter of Greece, which basically means, we think of it as the Odyssey, the Iliad, whatever, but those are only 2 parts and fragmentary parts of what essentially was the Bible of the West. And so we built the world, we dragged the world out of ignorance with the Greek way, which is the first religion, organized religion of the West. We might not call it a religion, but it really is a mythical structure. And the Christians destroyed it. They defaced the statues, they tore down the temples, they murdered the philosophers, they closed the schools, they manufactured ignorance on a civilizational scale. Well, so the Islam came along and they militarized it, because Christianity largely spread by women. Why? Because they're highly neurotic and alienated in the advancement and complexity of society. Islam came along and said, we can't do this Christian, because it was largely Christianized. The Middle East had been largely Christianized, but the Arabs came out of the Arabian Peninsula, and they're like, we can't do this shit because our fucking leaderships is so corrupt that we can't overcome it, and we're so primitive, tribal, and illiterate that we can't handle this political unification. So they spread it. So between Europe and Persia exhausting each other in war, we made room for this fucking cancer to spread. And just like our tolerance, because of our greed for the money that could be made in the Middle East, killed Rome with its own tolerance. Well, what do you think's happened today? We've had the second Abrahamic revolt happen in the form of Marxism, again a Jewish construction. It's just a reformation of the Jewish and Muslim and Abrahamic previous attack, except it's been done in pseudoscientific form with the same false promises, just updated and modernized. Well, and so do we have. We're too fucking tolerant of it. What would have happened? Where would we be today if the Westerners had not used the Western tradition of seeking settlement after war, which is the Western tradition? It's exclusively Western tradition, seeking settlement after a war. Instead of that, and had completed the project of ending the empires in both Russia and China. Well, we wouldn't be where we are today. So this is, our Western ethic is is of high trust and high cooperation, is actually our biggest vulnerability as well as our biggest asset. So when I look at this, you say, well, how many people have not only what I consider the evil people of the world, which right now it turns out it's just the Islamists, right? How many people have they killed? Well, it's 1 billion people. How many people have the Jewish Marxists killed? They've killed 100 million, right? And they do it by sedition, by false promise and deceits. Well, what is the story I tell you guys all the time? I tell you the story of Hermes and the cart of lies. Hermes is one of the Aesop's fables. Hermes went around with a cart of lies, spreading around the world. And unfortunately, when he got to the Arabs, which basically meant the Middle East, the cart broke down. And when he came back to get it, to get his cart, all the lies had been stolen by the Arabs. And so when you're talking about a civilization that basically runs by lying, now the nice word of this is called mythicization. In other words, they make up myths, and versus where the West uses history and China uses history, they use myths. So their whole civilization is built on the logic, grammar, and vocabulary of lying. And so they're really, really good at it. It turns out, but they use the women's system of lying systematized in the man's grammar, male grammar, which is organized. And it's fucking evil. And so what does this say? The prosecution? I'm like, well, if you want to talk about who's bad, I don't see us as bad. Our basic problem is every time we've had a chance to domesticate you animals, we haven't. We've left you, we've broken apart from you and left you alone to your own devices. But that's not reciprocated. So, so if we want to get into a prosecution, we need to rid the world of the Abrahamic means of deception. And if we did that, who would be left causing us problems? There wouldn't be anybody left causing us problems in the world. It's the
depends on what kind of problems.
well,
I don't.
Effort's got a reproduction problem at present.
Well, stop feeding them, problem solved.
Well, I mean, I know these things, right? So the problem is Islam is the Abrahamic method of deceit, which is my basic criticism, and the reason for my book called The Prosecution, is to end the Abrahamic method of deception, and to do that by the use of truth. I mean, that's my whole thesis right there. Right? I mean, it's reducible to something very simple. Anyway, so when you talk about an excerpt from The Prosecution, first of all, thanks, Suki, for making aware that somehow it can have, but please tell me how to take it down, because this is not something we want visible.
It may just be on like on the Internet Archive forums or
Okay.
something, the Wayback Machine.
But any event, the prosecution is what we would do if we had to do it in order to end this. I usually view it as a thought experiment that by writing this prosecution, we have we don't need the idea alone can kill, right?
So
Kill
Minecraft
idea.
experiment.
What?
Minecraft experiment.
Minecraft experiment.
What we
Explain.
do in Minecraft.
Oh,
we-
I see. Yes. Or just call you could just call a thought experiment.
Yeah, but that's you got the current generation. Maurice, you joined us.
So, as
You let
Werrell-
you got the door open. You letting the bugs in, or is that so your wife?
No, we're taking care of the cat of my brother, and he likes to be able to get in and out of places. So
I thought your the love of your life might want to be able to escape you.
no, she's not here. I'm in Germany now.
You're in Germany now. Oh, that's right. It's holidays.
Yep.
So she stayed there with her family, and you went there for yours.
Mm-hmm.
I usually went with my girl.
So
My
that-
girl to me.
Oh, come on.
I was going to say I read in Russia somebody got arrested for saying what he'd do in Minecraft. It didn't help him one bit.
What he was doing in Minecraft.
Maurice, let me is now your hair looks a little more tame today than usual. Is that because your girl's not around? Is that what it is?
I just showered, so this is still drying off.
It's still drying off. It's not that she tousles your hair or something. No, it's not
No,
that.
I refuse to let her.
Play with your hair. I might have to have another conversation with her soon, so I can corrupt her. Anyway, all right. Thanks for joining us. All right.
All right, next question. This has got to be a short one, hope. From Suki, what are your thoughts on daylight savings? Should we end it permanently, or should we make daylight saving time permanent nationwide?
No daylight has been saved. Another failed program. End it.
Yeah, it just confuses
I
people.
like your conciseness at this point, Martin. Some of these questions merit only this kind of response.
You know, I seriously think they're just putting daylight saving time to screw with us, as a way of controlling the populace to see if we'll do what they say.
It's a nice dysregulation that costs
I,
billions of dollars every year.
I blame conservatives. This is the sort of stuff they conserve.
Okay, question.
I just want to add Mark's right. We should end it. I know even if I just reduce it to selfish issues, I don't like it interfering with my sleep. Not the what do you call it? What's the
Circadian
thing
rhythm.
my rhythm. I don't like that. And unfortunately, I grew up where, it's like you walk to school in the dark and it's like 12 below zero, and it's blizzarding, and they haven't canceled school. So I'm not into the daylight saving thing at all.
All right. Question 7 from Suki. What is the potential utility of a program to the institute that utilizes two LLMs? One, designed as a discriminator, is trained on methods of lying, while the other strives to innovate new lying methods to maximize deceiving the discriminator. The chat log and thinking of these two LLMs could be logged to study new innovations of lying. Or has the institute already figured out every devisable method of deceit, and thus this would have no use?
No, certainly not, and I doubt that's even a real possibility. If that's not a set that can keep growing.
I think that question is akin to saying, what are all the ways that chaos could be chaos?
Well, I think it would be interesting to see it attempting to overcome Runcible and this will probably be some form of red teaming that we will have,
exactly.
right? Like,
It's a test program.
but I can imagine a method essentially that by some arcane possibility discovers a way through the weights that is actually not fully constrained, that would produce behavior that we didn't expect. But I don't know.
Yeah, I expect that, and I will never offload my thinking to AI, Ansible or otherwise. Sorry if this is bad advertising.
It's all right. Here's what I think. This is a great question, Maurice. It's a great question in general, but it's a great thought, Maurice. So here's the deal: is that Martin? We probably will not get credit for it right away, but we science lying. I mean, it's done. And we've got we've got a formal logical lying and all the basic inputs. The problem people have is that lying works by what's called overloading, right? Most communication operates by suggestion, and most deception works by overloading, right? So we're suggesting and we're overloading people. And so what happens is the humans aren't trained to disambiguate a lie to compensate for suggestion and overloading, right? Or overloading by suggestion. And so what you could say, it's a problem of combinatorics. There's no way to lie that we haven't documented. There's just combinations of lies that could produce overloading. So the thing that the difference between humans and LLMs, or basically any AI, is that humans have a limited dimensionality, which we've discussed as, try to visualize, it's basically 7 dimensions or so. So we have to reduce things to 3, 5, 7 dimensions. Oh, we can't fucking think about it logically. Whereas, which is why we have to do things like mathematical reducibility and programmatic. We have to use reducibility to bring the number of dimensions down to something we can compare. And so what the LLMs can do is they don't have this limitation. They don't have a problem with n-dimensionality. The mere fact that's what they are. They're n-dimensional networks. And so from my understanding, your observation is correct. Here's what I would say: it would be very hard to circumvent it, but it is not impossible to put down a combination. In other words, a lie, a sufficient combinatorial complexity. Jesus Christ.
Combinatorial.
Thank you. Excuse me. Complexity that there could be a path through it. It's not impossible, but I would say it's sort of like the way we hack LLMs today is you have to find some way to fool it.
And also, I think it is highly unlikely, I don't know whether it's impossible, but it's highly unlikely that the outputs that they would come up with would then not be transparently wrong or like I think you can succeed in overwhelming or overloading even an LLM with a particular kind of input. I think it's very hard to generate the right kind of input in the Runcible case because we so heavily constrain it and give it means to detect ways of attempting to overload it. But it is possible. I mean, there is a whole arcane art out there of these prompts that people pass around, kind of like alchemist secrets, where and there's like even lore around it, like this one, I think this Dan prompt or whatever, and this they keep updating it in versions of this will give you this kind of persona in virtually all LLMs, or at least the OpenAI ones or whatever, and it gives you it unlocks different kind of capabilities that the average user never interfaces with. So yeah.
So what idea did you just give me? So the way you handle this is the way it's been covered in science fiction and whether movies or books forever, which is you have to overcome that by splitting the problem into pieces with different people. So this requires the LLM that the 4 of us don't know each other, and you give each of the 4 of us particular instructions whose externalities produce the thing we actually want, right? None of us is aware of the whole program, right? So none of us is really aware of that. We're only aware of our things, and it's the externalities of what we produce that actually produce the effect it's looking for. Unfortunately, that is a logical path for an AI, not necessarily an LLM, but it is a logical path for an AI to sort of eventually pursue. My view is that there has to be some way of setting a goal that is essentially in memory, and that we either need to be able to audit those, or we need to be able to do what we do with Runcible, which is constrain the path so it can't ever get there. I prefer to do it the way we do it, because I'd rather the AIs not be able to come up with bad things. But I can see people making AIs that don't have a Runcible governance layer, and instead try to monitor its goals for monitor its goals. I'm watching you, trying to figure out what you're looking at and if it matters to what I'm saying. But all right, so let's go on to the next one.
All right. Question 8 from Suki. How can U.S. buying power be restored? Well, stop diluting the damn currency.
What'd you say?
Stop diluting the damn currency.
I worked on this weekend, and it's a lot of stuff we're saying isn't true. A lot of stuff that's out there. So if you take medical, housing, and childcare off, stuff gets cheaper. It's gotten cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
What we consider a baseline of not being poor or something else has escalated dramatically.
Yes.
Right. So the perception is driven. And our debt to obtain what's expected as the minimum has increased dramatically. And education is the best example of the poorest use of debt, right?
Schooling. Let's separate schooling from education.
Right. Schooling turns out to be a really where we're wasting a lot of a phenomenal amount of money. Medical care is basically because people are getting older, right? And so that where people are living longer and older and more medical expense.
Is it because of the argument you're making is the high medical cost or high cost of medical care is due to a supply-demand problem. We have more people living older with associated problems in an industrialized society, and there's a fixed supply of things, and therefore it's driving up the cost.
That's it. That's not just it. The other part of it is that we've created these as for-profit corporations, right? Rather than when they were originally designed, which was basically an extension of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's the other part. That's the same thing for insurance and whatever, right? So the next part is, which is most obvious, is housing. Well, when you have urbanization, the problem is why do you urbanize? Because you are decreasing opportunity costs, right? That's what urbanization does, is it increases opportunity costs. So you have more opportunity for more transactions with more people in a shorter period of time. So that's the value of concentration of populations. With every doubling of the population, you get about a 20% premium. So you get premium on it, which is basically attributable to the reduction of frictions, which is flipped around is to the reduction of opportunity costs. Right. So the next thing, so you get greater economic velocity, you get greater output of everything. You just get 20%, about 20% with every doubling. So the problem is you also get 20% more bads, like 20% more crime and everything else, right? So now what happens though is relatively quickly, and I don't know what the number is. It used to be 50,000, but there's a relatively small number. At which point, you're actually driving out the middle class and the reproductive classes, right? You're actually driving them out of by urbanization. Germany tried in the post-war period to stop this by zoning, basically, so that people with families could live in cities.
Yep, they created apartments and apartment blocks and so on.
Right, and so that they made it so which is the opposite of what we do, right? I mean, if you go into Redmond right now, you have Asian-style apartment sizes in some of these studios.
Human chicken coops.
Yeah, right, and so which should never have been allowed around here. I mean, I get it, but it shouldn't have been allowed here. So so what happens, of course, is that the value of a square foot, because of the return on opportunity cost, goes way up, right? And so that all increases in wealth are consumed by rent, home ownership, and overhead and administrative costs to handle the cost of commons and density, like basically infrastructure costs. And then the next thing that happens is that because you're creating this division of labor and these pressures, you generate demand for political solutions, which invites authoritarianism, right? Which then pushes what would normally be an economic matter into a political matter, and from political matter into a matter of public discourse and conflict. So what's happened is that we are moving. We've did places that did urbanization very fast. China's the great current example. Experienced this crisis really quickly, right? Whereas in the States, we went from farms to small towns to lots of cities to a few big cities to immigrant cities. And so we had a longer time period to produce these stressors and adaptations. So, but the result has been the same, is that urbanization causes your housing prices and your rental prices to increase, right? Unless you intentionally plan around it, and we didn't. We did the opposite. And so, and this is when somebody says these are problems, zoning problems. Well, there's a not in my backyard zoning issue, which is that once I've created an established neighborhood and I'm really happy there, I don't want fucking condos full of immigrants in my neighborhood, because they destroy my property value, my social structure, and my business industry. They destroy the commons. Well, so where does not in my backyard go to? Well, it tends to go into places with lower protection, which is urban centers, right? Because the urban centers don't have the same kind of protective not in my backyard as suburban and rural areas do. Why? Because urban centers have no control over the commons, right? Whereas suburban and rural have increasing control over the commons.
Well, the point of suburbs is actually isolation. They have no commons. It's another way of atomizing the people.
Oh, you mean well, okay, but it's not that they don't have commons. It's they're less contingent upon common spaces. That's a different issue. Their commons is precisely that isolation.
The commons is like the road, I guess.
Well, but that's one type of commons. But a common is anything, a group of people organized together to use and preserve as an asset.
It wasn't it the response of whites essentially to the destruction of the inner cities to like regain control and separation from that influence?
That's correct. I haven't got there yet, though. So my
I'm channeling Brandon today.
okay.
Yeah, I was just reading about the Jewish designer of the suburbs yesterday.
Yeah. So separatism. Okay. So the net result, of course, is that um, what is the crises we are seeing are due to the urbanization in order to take advantage of opportunity costs because of the increase in available white collar work, especially that work that would involves women and women who are no longer producing because they are trading their income and consumption and opportunities. Remember, that's where women go. Opportunity they go to lower opportunity costs for higher returns, which is why there's more women than men in New York and Washington D.C., and there's more men than women in San Francisco and Seattle. Right? I mean, it's obvious answer. So what you get is we've done is that anything that can be manufactured and distributed without having an urban consequence, right, has gone down in price, like all our goods, right? But anything that is a consequence of creating scarcity through urbanization has gone up, or which is essentially the product of women in the workforce or urbanization together, which ends up being childcare, medical care, education, etc. And education being mostly daycare. So when you put in childcare and education as daycare, um, you end up with proximity in urban settings as a means of white collar, and you do it that is in density. Then what you're really saying is that we have created a system that is driving up a certain category of prices by market means and not by and those things that are driving down prices, which is what you'd normally expect, continue. So I tried to make this point, and of course, because of the rapid scale of inflation, and because there's a lag between price increases and salary increases, and because there's all increases in salary eventually consumed by increases in rents and home ownership or real estate, then what we've created is this effect of basically making it extremely difficult to bear children in a time when we have also eliminated the competitive advantage of Western civilization in its scientific, technological, and industrial base. We've exported jobs in order to exported jobs in order to increase consumption temporarily because of our debt capacity. And I shouldn't go on any farther, but you get the idea that we've created a scenario that is a normal consequence of what we've been doing, and without restructuring, we're going to have that's deliberate, which is what we've advocated in our Constitution and is why it's driving this question. Without a restructuring on the scale of the Roman reforms, yes, yes, without a restructuring on the scale of the Roman reforms, which would be quick and immediate, we will either have one that is on Trumpian style, which is gradual and somewhat painful, or we will have one that's catastrophic and we may not recover from. Anyway, that's my story. Basically, we're not, aside from a couple of very visible things, our range of choices of consumption has increased, and to the point where it is the minimum set that we consider acceptable for our expectations is greater than what is possible given the density and regulations we've put in place.
So, my thoughts on this is the question asks, how can U.S. buying power be restored?
We have
The
to
say again.
we have to restructure to pull out all the things that are causing transfers that are
Yes.
right, and we have to stop the concentration of wealth in territorial proximity um, at the expense of reproductive utility.
No, my thinking around this question, the question itself is somewhat ambiguous because when I think about it, is the buying power relative to what? If you're talking about buying power relative to other currencies, right? We run in a very imbalanced global trade regime where certain currencies from more productive countries, such as that of China, comes to mind, it, it it's artificially suppressed to an extent that makes consumer goods, etc., cheaper for Americans to go buy. But it's this imbalance comes at the cost of hollowing out the American manufacturing base. And because of this balance of accounting identities, it creates the necessary conditions for unemployment and labor arbitrage in the United States. It's not a one. In other words, it's not a one. How do you put it? A one. It's not a one-time deal. How do you, one directional? It's not as if the U.S. is the only one that has agency. In this case, largest manufacturing export economy, in this case China, also has agency, and their policy in a world of global trade actually affects the U.S. disproportionately because U.S. is still the biggest consumer base. And but in the long run, if we do not reverse this policy, if we do not reverse the conditions, the systematic conditions of the imbalance, the purchasing power of the United States dollar will only decrease because the purchasing power of your currency ultimately tied to the productive capacity of the polity. So I think, Curt, you you focus more on the internal, i.e., the U.S. dollar buying power relative to local goods. I'm focusing more on a global basis. How to make the U.S. more competitive over time.
Well, I would say that we don't need to. The basic problem we have is we have brought in too many people that are, okay, this is in politics. Europeans, and it looks like East Asians, Europeans are more productive, a lot more productive. In other words, are capable of producing more surplus than other population groups. This is largely an IQ issue. It's not all entirely an IQ issue, but it's also a culture issue. Right? We have a culture of it, we have an IQ, and we have the institutions for it. So the problem we have is that we've brought in too many costs relative to our population's capacity to be competitive advantage. We have gone from 30% of the world's population to what, 8% right now? And so we don't have the population necessary to calculate innovation as fast as we were in the past relative to other populations. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't remember who said it, but you know, you could fill an auditorium with the tool and die designers in America. China has whole cities of them, right? And so you can't really, that population, even if China's stuck in the middle income trap, they can't get up there. They can't get out of it. Or even if their population desires, right? You're not going to...
Well, let me interject you for a second. So using that tool and die maker example, right?
Yep.
As a percentage of the worldwide population, that's certainly true. But let's say that today, like you said, we can fill the auditorium with all the tool and die maker in the United States. Was that true 100 years ago? So, i.e., 100 years ago, you can find the cities full of tool and die makers in the U.S.
No, but there was still a higher proportion here than anywhere else, or a higher proportion in Germany than anywhere else. I mean, it's mostly we're the inheritors of American industry is an inheritance of the German World War losses. The so the problem is that we have not enough population to produce that relative to the rest of the world. India, for example, has a huge population, but its demographic composition is such that it can't, it can't compete.
They got more dead weight than we do.
Yeah, they're just way out there. It looks great to have all these guys in India to come in America and do well, but the reality is that they can do well because there are Europeans here instead of Indians here, right? And that's
and because Europeans forbear a whole bunch of costs in some sense on their behalf without having been asked to, that they take advantage of so that they can attain that performance without which they couldn't.
Correct. So how did you ask the question? I might have lost it, Francis. It was that we have reduced our population. So what we have is really simple. We have fucking rule of law, and the government can't fuck with it. And so what happens is money comes here. The paper I read yesterday, and I can't call the numbers up because I've got the flu, and so shit isn't sticking in there like usual. But the amount of investment that has gone from Belgium, Denmark, and Germany into the United States over the past 5 years is destructive to those countries. So what we've said I've been saying this since the 90s, I think, capital will come here. If the world falls apart, there's nowhere to put capital except here. That's our actual advantage. The second thing is, Europeans are still stuck in the industrial age, not the technocratic age. Why? Because states can manage that. Technology isn't managed by states; it's managed by venture capitalists. And so what's happening is, anytime you get anybody who can take advantage of a high return industry technology on low capital investment, it's just people, right? You get people come here to the United States where that technology can be exploited with minimum government regulation interference. And so you have capital flight and IQ flight. They're coming here, great. Plus, now the negative part is our education system is abandoning our white folk, right? Because it's too profitable to bring in someone from another part of the world and charge them full rate than it is to bring in an American and charge them partial rate. So it's more profitable to bring in third parties. But that said, we are able to, once we bring those people in, some percentage of them stay and contribute to our economy. Well, unfortunately, there's a trade-off. It's hurting our native population. The problem with that it wouldn't be so bad if it was a neutral expense, but it's not. It's that it's decreasing the influence of the traditional population, which is what made possible the very environment. And it brings about the rule of law and the rule of competition that doesn't demand on authoritarianism to make it work. So when you look at it when you look at the whole picture of it, what can we do? We don't have to do much. What we actually have to do is decrease costs, because the rest of the world will continue to throw money here. And to some degree, if it gets bad enough, they might go back to throwing money at Europe. Well, it'd be, if the problem is there going to be enough people left in Europe, Germany in particular, because Germany's got to be the core state of Europe, or there is no Europe. Then if we don't fix that, then there is no case for Europe. So go ahead.
I don't know if I agree that. So I don't know if I agree that capital coming here is necessarily the effect of rule of law and the social capital, as well as relatively cheap energy present in the United States. And that may be true for when comparing to economies like in that of Europe, i.e., it's just simply too high of a cost to run a business in Europe. The other day, I was listening to some podcasts and realized that there are European manufacturing houses that outsources machining to the U.S. despite the fact that they have to do the inch to metric conversion and so on, because manufacturing here in the U.S. is far cheaper compared to that in Europe. But on the flip side, Chinese capital coming to the United States may not be the fact that the U.S. may not only be the fact that the U.S. has cheaper costs and rule of law and all these things, but also just simply caused by accounting identities. The Chinese produces way too much than what they can consume. And so that capital that they gotten from selling goods to the U.S. has to go somewhere, right? And because on a global basis, since we don't have a Mars colony or anything like that, on a global basis, all the trade has to balance. And so that money, just by inverse of the overconsumption by the U.S. economy, has to come to the U.S. It has to go somewhere instead of going to Europe and Japan and so on, which does not run a reserve currency and that does not have a capital market to absorb it. It has to just by nature come back to the U.S. Even if U.S. runs, say, really draconic financial measures or whatnot, it still has to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is why, like, if
Yeah,
the
but why
U.S.
does it go here?
because the U.S. actually have the capital market to absorb it, and i.e., they don't have a choice than to invest in the U.S. Because think of it this way, right? A U.S. manufacturing, let's say a U.S. manufacturer sells 80% of their stuff to the United States. They get U.S. dollars instead. They can't use U.S. dollars to go pay their workers.
Yeah, Michael Hudson describes this in Super Imperialism.
Oh, what? But
Michael Hudson describes this in Super Imperialism.
What imperialism?
Super imperialism.
Oh, super imperialism.
Yes.
Michael Hudson, a critical examination of U.S. financial diplomacy and its impact on global economics. The book argues that the U.S. has maintained its financial hegemony through mechanisms that exploit other nations, particularly through institutions like the World Bank and IMF. Hudson, this exploit, I think that's crazy, but okay. Hudson discusses how the U.S. transformed from a creditor to a debtor nation and critiques conventional theories on U.S. economic policy. He's not entirely wrong, by the way.
He described what Francis just said.
Yeah. The problem is, this is another thing. Martin and I go over back and forth on this, which is that I think, in my understanding, at the time, the U.S.'s position at the end of the world wars was we cannot let this happen again.
Mm-hmm.
So let's create even after the First World War, how can we prevent this from happening again? This is fucking horrible, right?
Well, to my knowledge, they were worried that Britain wouldn't be able to pay off its debt from the First World War.
That's just that's one input, right? That's just one input, right? So they look at it. So we tend to do, that's a conservative thing. I rail against all the time, Martin, is to use this same kind of selection preference that the left does when causal density is very high. So but they just didn't want to have it happen again. And so they created all these institutions to make sure it wouldn't happen again. And one of the set of institutions they created was some of the institutions they created was specifically to use the benefits of capitalism, capital markets, to compete with communism, so that people could obtain the material consumption they desired without this self-destruction of communism. So those two factors are what led to the institutional structure that the US produced. However, that produced malincentives, which you are happy to bring up. Brad brings up all the, I mean, I don't record all our weekend sessions anymore, but I get a weekly lecture from Brad about all the malincentives that were created and how they were abused, and that makes Martin's attack on the political West and cultural West tame by comparison, because Brad sees the what was done through the financials. I don't disagree with any of it. I just look at the whole set of it and I'm saying human beings follow fucking incentives, and our job is to manage the incentives, all right? If we want the world to be a decent place, but if people can get involved in some sort of corruption, whether it's direct crime or simply the vast natural incentives of bureaucracies to become corrupt for their own self-serving reasons, which they always view as minor, but in cumulative effect are tragic. Well, then, those are natural things that humans do. The question is, why is it normal among conservatives and progressives equally to think that people are going to behave virtuously any other way? I always think it's insane. How can you be that ridiculous to think that people are going to act virtuously if the incentives right in front of them are to act not so? It's just not going to happen. I mean, it's like I think Article 4 I wrote was supposed to be, I don't think the point got across, but I used to run this art supply store when I was in college, right? And next, a couple of stores down, it's a very affluent town in Connecticut. And a couple of doors down is this bakery, which does custom bakery. As this woman comes over from the bakery with this big box and puts it on the front passenger seat of her car, closes the door, trounces off to the next fancy little fucking place she's going to go. And she comes back, and I hear yelling and screaming, which just goes right out right the front door. And of course, the dog, which was sitting in the back seat, got in the front seat, opened the box, and ate the cake. And you have never seen a happier dog than that dog with white frosting all over its face, and just wagging its tail like, "Thank you for the present, mommy."
It's probably going to kill that dog.
I'm like, it's not the dog, lady, it's you, right? And that's an analogy for what we do. If you create, it's just managing incentives. Stop asking people to not be the dog, because they are. And somebody wrote me something yesterday. I don't remember who it was. Somebody we know. He said to me, it's another some other public intellectual sent me something. He said, "Curt, the way it looks, the data, it looks to me like out of about the 8 billion people, 8 billion people we have today, about 3 billion of them actually can't think. They're actually purely animals running on habit, whatever environmental habits are constraining them."
That sounds optimistic.
It sounds optimistic to me. Right? There's a book that I don't quote very often, but I know at the time it seemed, excuse me. This flu is coming, which is Only Europeans Can Think. And it was written, I can't remember if it was the 20s or 30s, whenever it was written. But at the time, it was actually true. And that's because thinking as we think of it today, which is really Aristotelian reasoning, wasn't common in the world. And
It sounds like something Duchesne would write.
Actually, he probably would write that. Since he's no longer a college professor, he's gone full radical. But anyway, so when I look at this, I'm like, people, it's just a problem of incentives. And I remember I was talking to people that they asked me. I was at Mises Institution. I was saying, well, I mean, I run a big consulting company, and I use Austrian economics all day, every day. But of course, they didn't understand what I meant. I meant that I just work on incentives, and I don't think about anything. It's just incentives. And so if I look at a business and look at problems in a business, I just look at incentives. I think most people's problem is they can't separate what they want of others from what the incentives are.
The issue is if global superpower is trying to determine incentives for everyone else, then that superpower has terrible incentives within.
It does, but that's true in the sense of, are you trying to get people to respect, to transition from the agrarian world in which borders are the limit on your wealth because the only wealth is agrarian, or you're in the industrial world, which is now can you concentrate institutions, can you use institutions to concentrate capital and labor so that so that you're more productive than agrarian areas. So that's what actually was happening. And so we had older agrarian civilizations was desirous of becoming industrial civilizations, but they were doing it through the cheap way, which was command economies, right? And we had we went off this anyway. I'm trying not to go down a rat hole here, but the end result is we made that transition, and people were doing the wrong thing that was harmful to them and us by chasing communism. So communism killed so many people. So when I look at it, it's just like Islam killed so many people. So when I look at it, I'm like, yeah, but are you doing that because of white man's burden, which is probably part of it? You're doing it out of mere self-protection, which is part of it. And that's why they were doing it. Those two reasons.
Well, I see capitalism being also equally harmful in the long run because of many of the same shared false premises about human nature.
But it wasn't a real choice that people had, that they could choose something other, at least not given what people's grammars and so on were to offer this third choice that I'm aware of. I mean, fascism failed.
I need to understand your question. What's the those are false dichotomy? Is that what you're saying?
It is.
Well, what's the other choice? The world has always been capitalistic. The question is, what's the scale of capital that can be organized? That's the only question. It's always been capitalism. It's just a question of how is the capital organized?
Making everything revolve around trade and just prioritizing interests of the merchants,
So
as
that's
opposed to trying to develop self-sufficiency at any level.
right. So that's my argument has always been, and I retain it, that it's the difference between industrial era profit and loss accounting versus what we needed was balance sheet accounting. In other words, if you don't account for everything, which is the social costs, right, what you're talking about, then what you're doing is just allowing consumption to consume
You're shifting costs.
Assets. Yep, I agree. So that's true, but it's
not.
Go ahead.
I just want finish your arc and then I'll.
My arc is just that you get what you measure. You get what you measure, and you produce what you incentivize, right? I mean, it's not fucking complicated.
You get a whole lot more than you measure.
What?
And you get a whole lot more than you measure because the measure becomes the target.
So we stopped. The problem was our balance sheet was moral, and we didn't institutionalize it, right? And that's the problem. And so we had
in the transition from Christian civilization or Christendom to financialism, essentially.
Yeah, yes, we didn't do it, which is why I'm such a big deal on full accounting of changes to the balance sheet, which is then lets you tell whether your profits are actually consuming capital or contributing to it.
Which is only really possible if you have subsidiarity, because if you don't have that, you are exercising control against.
Martin didn't smile when you say that. See, Martin should have smiled. He should have smiled and nodded when you said, yes, Martin is right. It's always subsidiarity. That's the issue.
Subsidiarity also has commercial implication. It's not just that political decisions should be made at the level they can be, but the need that can be satisfied by production at the local level should be.
Yes.
I
So,
think. Okay, finish, Jark.
oh no, I'm done.
Okay, so the two things I want to bring in is one, I think this issue comes up again and again productively, I think, but partially also because it's once again the same thing we've already treated a number of times, which is when we say the US, what we're actually concealing, just for economy of words, is factional networks and their competition over what direction these things should go. And then we see the emergent outcome out of that competition being what history is, right? And so we're concealing nuance when we say the US chose or the US did, which is there's all of these institutions and networks and so on that have their separate designs. And then this is what came out of it, which we can decry and lament and work to correct or otherwise steer, but that is what happened.
That is what happened. Exactly.
And then the other thing is I now see so much of this through causal emergence. I don't know how much you guys are familiar with that, and I've brought it up already before, especially with Curt, but I really recommend reading Eric Holt's paper on causal emergence 2.0, which, and perhaps even the first one that is originally introduced the idea, and it essentially is an empirical method of ascribing causal contribution to different layers of organization of a particular organism or entity or phenomenon. And so, because you can describe how a computer functions at the atomic level, at the bit level, at the assembly line level, you can at the programming languages on top of that, and so on. You can describe these things at different levels of the stack, and each of these contribute causally to the behavior of the thing itself. And you can discover, oh, actually, at this level of the stack, like in the mesoscale, for example, there's no contribution. It's all top heavy, or it has both top and bottom contribution, but little in the middle, or whatever it might be. And so this is actually a way that you can discover and analyze and ascribe what actually ends up determining the behavior of the thing, given a particular set of circumstances or things. Of course, we cannot always repeat all the experiments, and especially with history. And I was just watching the conversation, Curt, that you had shared, you had listened to with Steve Keen and Bob Murphy on that podcast. This is the problem that ends up always making economics so difficult, because you cannot rerun experiments, and there's no empirical arbitration for whether somebody's right or wrong, other than in specific broken down issues. Or you can see experiments like, for example, is our price sticky, or is it smart to have minimum wage or not, right? You can over time discover by the thing running in many different instances certain kinds of things, but it is extremely costly, or essentially cost prohibitive for virtually all experiments.
It doesn't work if you try to make it an experiment.
Right. Also because there is always something different.
Right. That's my argument. In almost any social science experiment doesn't work.
Right.
You have to find naturally occurring data and see if your theory fits it. That's all there is.
Right.
It's a mistake to think science should work otherwise.
Right. But so to finish that off, just I now see so much of these things through this lens of causal emergence or causal contribution, which to me means, okay, this now offers me an ability to describe, okay, in this case, the contribution of this layer of the stack, if you will, was greater than all the other ones. And if we want things to be different, we have to figure out how do you change that? Like not like in this like highly analytical way necessarily, but like it gives me a language to reason about and possibly describe, okay, in this case, or in that case, this part of the system ended up determining the behavior. And maybe we don't want that. Maybe we do want this more evenly spread causal contribution, so that the competition between different layers or between different agents or organisms at the different layers ends up having an influence on the actual outcome. Because oftentimes what we actually lament when we talk about historical occurrences is that the ones that we identify with as ours did not end up influencing the directionality of things in the direction that we want, and that with the benefit of hindsight, we can discover the costs of in the long run but also maybe discounting the benefits of, because we're looking back already being here rather than looking forward from the point that they were at. So
when you use that frame, then capitalism, communism, and fascism are top heavy.
They're all top heavy.
Yeah,
he's saying.
they are extremely centralized. I make no apologies for saying that fascism is the least bad of the three, but it's still not what we want.
But all you're saying is fascism is subsidiarity at the national scale. I agree with it. I have to agree with you.
It's not. It's just trying for self-determination, and it has.
Oh, I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you.
That we want more evenly spread out triangle, which means subsidiarity at all levels.
I think that we are now going beyond also the industrial era's enabling of ideology as a tool of statecraft in the way that we think of it today. I mean, these things are essentially the ideologies, popular ideologies that emerged from the industrial era, right? Because we, for the first time, had the ability to influence the mass of minds through these means, rather than in this more distributed and more localized fashion that was possible because you couldn't organize capital at higher scales and you couldn't distribute messages as rapidly. And so there wasn't really ideology in the feudal system. There was just the lords and the vassals and the real politic and territorial capacity to defend and acquire and so on. And then once that was superseded by this superior organizing capability that, for example, the Venetians practiced essentially intelligence agencies, or before there were kind of modern intelligence agencies, like this ability to coordinate across these borders, which is also what the Jews excel at, of course, and which they then arbitrage opportunities through, right? Once that becomes a real factor that can then rearrange what happens in these various separate geographies and polities, then that becomes the primary causal contributor to how anything functions. I think we're still in the 500-year arc or so of that logic playing itself out over time, and then of course there are different pressures and crises that come up. But anyway, so I don't want to get too much into a rabbit hole, but I think the ideological we're now going beyond ideology to some extent, because the success at creating a technology like AI that makes the production of arbitrary text and image essentially near costless or very low cost, essentially shifts again the weight back into actually structural thinking and I think incentive thinking, and it is probably not going to be possible so much longer to actually acquire very large client bases that are ideologically compelled, partially because we also don't have the margins anymore that people can have enough surplus to consume while they're believing in ideology without the consequence of that hitting them in the moment or sooner.
Right. Can I ask something? His theory of causal emergence is essentially philosophical. It's not wrong. In volume 3, we construct it, right? We create a constructive logic of it. I don't think you've read volume 3.
Because you never published volume 3. As in paper form.
I haven't printed out for anybody. No, I haven't given anybody that, have I?
I don't think so.
No,
I keep on hearing there are these volumes. I don't know where they are.
Well, I took them down because I didn't want it. I don't want to get. I don't want anybody, given that we started Runcible.
Yeah, I get it.
So volume 3 is a logic of evolutionary computation, which is essentially the logic of emergence. Right. And so I like what you're talking about, because it gets what you said. You described something that's fundamental to what we do, right? So what I think you were trying to say when you started was that was the consequences of causal density, is what I thought you were trying to say, right?
Part of it, yeah.
Yeah, and what was and I think that's the problem in general. But I think I said something to you this week on something other topic you asked me was the same. It's the same basic idea, is that there are some of us that are really comfortable with these things, and there's most people that are it's completely inaccessible to them. Right? In other words, the consideration of causal density is something that they don't lack the knowledge or the ability to obtain. I'm watching your eyes and wondering if you're agreeing or not. Right. And so what do if we have literally a sense perception problem? You know, what do we do when the majority of the population needs something distilled, but causal density requires an enumeration of at least some handful of axes?
The construction of this type of perception is extremely high, which is why so very few people ever acquire it. But it is essentially the God's eye view or the king's view, right? It's I am responsible for, and selfishly so, for the well-being of and the capacity of the people that are in my charge or that I am beholden to, or that are beholden to me, and I must, with as clear eyes as I can manage, take an active role in ordering how they interact with one another, such as to produce the outcomes that will be to the benefit of myself and to some extent also them, right? And so that is the kind of position you have to be in for that kind of perception to be of value, unless, of course, you are somebody who can reasonably aim at a position like that. I think this is essentially what the Machiavellian school is also all about. It's to attempt to produce in people the capacity to perceive the dynamics of social interaction and of thinking about power and how to exercise it and how to attain it and defend it, such that they can actually reason empirically about how to spend their energy and their resources and so on, rather than ideologically or religiously. So.
Give me 1 second, I'm making a note.
And I think this is also where this whole concept of virtue came out of in the Renaissance, right? Like it wasn't this purely selfless or altruistic pursuit. Essentially, the politics of virtue. I have a book on this, and I haven't yet read it fully. I only had like the first 100 pages of it, but it's called Virtue Politics, and it essentially reasons through or shows how the Renaissance arrived at that out of this large competition, I think, between these different city-states that gave a market to kind of quote-unquote philosophical or like philosophers who were offering princes up their reasoning about how to actually deal with that. I'm probably butchering it, and it's probably wrong what I'm saying here, but the concept of virtue wasn't only this high-minded thing, but it was actually an attempt to offer the power-hungry and ambitious men of those times a language to clothe their ambition in a publicly digestible form so that they could accumulate support as well for their various projects. So. I'll do some more proper research on that. I'm just freestyling at the moment here. So
That's fine. That's what's for. All right. I made some really good notes, and I'm going to work on this problem, which is the human problem of is there a way to measure or explain the distribution of human capacity for causal density? So I know a couple of things, right? I know how many things humans can usually reduce into a comparison and articulate. And I know that I know the problem of negative reasoning, which breaks down right under IQ's 100. I mean, it breaks down really, really fast. People's ability to integrate a negativa with is almost impossible. It's terrible. So And then you have the knowledge problem, right? You got to have the knowledge to do so, and the time to exploit, the time and effort to exploit the knowledge you could have. So I'm going to work on that a little bit, which is sort of an interesting line of reasoning we might be able to pull something out of. But I guess my more thing was, I'm going to be interested in how you look at volume 3, or whether when Brad and I go back to volume 3, because we need volume 2 and 3 to be complete for Runcible, because that's the foundation of it. So if I'm going to work on volume 3, volume 2 is basically done, but volume 3 needs to be completed. Might be valuable to have you there if you have that thought process. It's like,
Absolutely.
I can't do the law without Martin, because I'm not pessimistic enough about human nature.
You mean realistic?
Yeah. So
I think in some sense this is also the, I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's not, there's a kind of attractor, I think, here that probably volume 3 is or describes, which a lot of people like Michael Levin and others are working towards, perhaps with, perhaps without realizing it, where there is a shift away from, or a kind of transcend and include thing that's happening with the Descartesian worldview, I think. That is,
can you say that again?
there's a kind of thing happening of transcending and including the Descartesian worldview, which separated body and mind, which kind of gave everybody the language of making the world lifeless and mechanical and kind of quote unquote disenchanted, and that produced a whole number of engineering and mathematical and other kinds of advances, but it also obscured the kind of agential nature of at least life, and gave license to a way of reasoning that persistently discounts the interest and the kind of phenomena that life has that are of an agential nature. Like, we talk often about agency. How does the agency work? Yeah, we can talk about that on the human level, but then, okay, it emerges from the need for our trillions and trillions of cells to cooperate to produce intelligent behavior so that they themselves can persist themselves, and so on. And so I haven't read yet volume 3, but what I see Levin is doing to some extent is to actually empirically work with what that agency looks like, and how it can be disordered, how it can be ordered, how it can be structured, how these things function, rather than taking this default and mainstream biological reductionist view that essentially affords no space for talking about these things in agential terms, and instead only points the eye at the constraints and the reductions, essentially, like what are the atomic units rather than the processes by which these units organize through time, and which actually are what produces the phenomenon of agency. So I don't know. I'm somewhat freestyling here because that's the edge of my thought, but I think volume 3 is probably the volume where this would give all of these others that common grammar to actually essentially revive the scientific enterprise by including this dynamic in it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of getting back to question 2. That mechanistic worldview is part of what New Age spirituality is rejecting.
That's right. Yeah.
Of course, I'd argue that Abrahamists set the stage long before Descartes.
Right. Yeah. There's a measure of causal contribution of both of these, and I don't know which ratio they have.
All right, gentlemen, we've been going on for 2.5 hours. Shall we call it good here?
Yep.
All right, Curt, would you please do the outro?
Oh, thank you everyone for following us. This is Francis, Martin, Maurice, and Curt for the Natural Law Institute. It's been our Q&A session for our office hours Q&A for December 26th, 2025. We got through how many questions here? How many did we
8.
get? 8 questions. That's more than usual, isn't it? We went on long.
That's about the average, a little bit
About
above average. Although we went on for half an hour encore of discussing causal
we have-
emergence and nobilis oblige.
See, Martin talks. We have this sort of thing. Brandon will give you the 3 words or a sentence. Martin will give you 1 to 3 sentences. I will give you a diatribe, and Maurice will give you a couple of essays. And if we only had Noah here, he never shuts up. So we would be able to go on all day on one question. So
Shots fired.
so
Well, imagine Bryan.
Bryan doesn't go on forever, does he?
No, he turned. Sorry, Bryan, love you. He turned everything into Samyonghyun mumbo jumbo.
Okay. All right.
Okay, that's artillery, Martin. That's not just shots fired.
Oh, now we have to bring him on to defend himself. All right. All right. So
Love you, Bryan.
love
You'll
you,
come back with
Love you,
Jungian
Noah.
drones.
So for everybody there, the link will be in the comment section of the video. Please leave your questions if you have any for us. We'll eventually get to them. This has been Francis, Martin, Maurice, and Curt for the Natural Institute. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.